So Jane, I met Elena like just 3 hours before I met you. Just want to say, just saying. So she is also a best friend. There's a bunch of best friends in this room right now. You need to be best friend. Yes, yes. So first of all, thank you so much for making the time and just agreeing to speak about this. And for everyone who's joining us virtually and all of us here in the room, the intention, I really just wanted to speak with Elena and let her share with everyone kind of what the journey, what KPMG's journey had been, and also to open up the space a little bit so that we have some time to share what you're working on or hearing from other people about how you're addressing, responding to employees' concerns and feelings about the war between Israel and Hamas, because it has been ongoing work for everyone, certainly since it started, and lots of turns and pivots and twists. So thank you for making yourself available for this. So first, I'd love for you to just talk about like what was homeostasis on October the 6th? Like what was homeostasis for how people may have been talking about, thinking about religious diversity at KPMG or diversity broadly read. I'd just love to hear a little bit about what was happening on October the 6th.
Yeah, so pre that event that happened, we from a religious inclusion perspective, Mark, you know that we've launched pilot interfaith pilots. And we've been down that path and have been working with Tanenbaum for 4 cities across the country to make sure that we're really thinking about how do we bring the intersection of all faiths or no faith together for conversations with colleagues on what do we need to help support and bring aspects of our identity to the workplace. And so in that, we've had dialogue, because I think what's really important is if you have a group of all faiths, you want to make sure that you continue and have all faiths represented so you have the richness of the conversation. Because if not, absent of that, you then present a more just one singular faith group, right? And by doing that, then you're sending signals to others that they're not welcome or included. So just the guiding principle we've had is how do we keep it open to all? How do we make sure that we have representation? Because if you think about it, in the hierarchy, you'll have different folks at different levels. If one group is coming together, then do they feel really welcomed? And without being included on a distribution list, how do we make sure that all people feel like they can be a part? And so that was happening pre all these events with respect to religion specifically. We also have been working towards bringing our MENA population together, so our Muslim or Middle East, North African colleagues through our African ancestry and our API, which is our Asian Pacific Islander networks. We're coming together and saying they need a community. And so we're piloting that. And then obviously the events of the 6th happen, and how do you provide space for, I guess one other caveat I will say, we also are asking our professionals to self-identify. And we launched this campaign, and I say campaign because I do think we have to always iterate on how much we ask people to trust the organization and tell us more about themselves. And so I'll be with the firm now. Tomorrow will be 3 years. And what we wanted to do was make sure more people are telling us more about aspects of their identity. And we asked the question about religion or faith and asked people to tell us. And so that was an opportunity for us to have a little bit more of what types of religions, how people identify. And that was helpful because of the next conversation that I'll talk about after the 6th. So a little bit more data for people to share was super helpful, especially after the events of what happened on the 6th. And we brought together a vigil for our Israeli and Jewish colleagues because we wanted to give them the space and the grace to grieve and to mourn what was happening. We also provided the same opportunity for our Muslim employees. Interesting feedback, I will say. We continue to get strong feedback, and I think feedback is a gift. I always say that because it's helpful to hear what people need and what they feel would be support. We may not always be able to get them what they need in the way of support, but it does provide a listening channel. And I think the ways of which we communicate, whether or not we use the right words, how do we make sure that we're not offending or alienating our employees? But while all of this is happening, we want to make sure that we're grounded in our values as an organization and wanting to do right, as you said, with our behaviors and how we interact as colleagues that have to work on projects together, whether or not we have the same belief system or not. So the managing behaviors piece or training is something that I'm just even in this conversation saying, how do we provide people access to that a little bit more freely? But all of that happened. The feedback that we continue to get, I think, is really important around how people even are trying to tell others how to grieve. So that's the most interesting part. So a person can say, yes.
So you didn't say you were going to come and do that. So telling people how to grieve.
Right, or giving us feedback on that. So that, you didn't even know that part, right? So
don't touch me. That's too good. That's too good.
So you can't really tell people how. Sorry, you can't tell. Oh, so I was doing the same thing. Jane, you just told me. Jane and I were sitting back there, like, you have to project so others can hear. And I always feel like I have a loud voice. That. So, telling people how they should grieve was interesting because I think if we sit in whatever grief we have, what we want to do is provide people access to hear. And that, to me, is the best way that we can empathize and truly show a level of compassion for colleagues, which is why we did the session with Mark, because we wanted to bring people together all across the firm, and was joined by our CHRO, or our talent and culture leader, Sandy Torcha, because we know that people are hurting through a whole host of things right now. And we wanted to make sure that they understood how we lead with a level of empathy and understanding. And so we had some experts come and do that. And Mark was one of the ones that said yes to participate and has been a real partner in how we've tried to think about our journey towards more religious inclusion at the firm. And so that's where we were, that's where we're going. And I continue to tell everyone that, just because we have these diversity roles and sit in these seats, we too are human and will make some mistakes. And so this is an area that I will tell, and Mark knows this, an area that I've always said you have to be really careful. And I want to partner and make sure that we do something that's not going to, we have to pull back, right? Because it is so personal to one's identity that we have to be really careful. And so I want to do it right. And I want to do it where our people have a sense of pride in what we're doing, but then also being really respectful on what we need to be successful ultimately and safe at work, right? Because you don't want someone to share something with you and then feel like the information is going to be used in a way that will be exclusionary in some form or fashion. So that's a little bit of real life. I can tell you we're living it each and every day, and I'm learning a lot and growing a lot. And hopefully people know with the best of intentions that we are going to hopefully do the right thing each and every day. So
I'm still on that last thing you said. I'm really, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I guess the thing that I want to pull something from what the statistic that Jane was sharing about the percentage of people not wanting others to be uncomfortable. And that's why they don't come out at work. And also noting, I mean, even in our own survey, which was in 2013, for those people who had witnessed or experienced religious bias, only 20% of them reported to a manager. And of that 20%, I think it was well over 50% said nothing was done. So I'm curious, again, thinking kind of like for the what's next, or because unfortunately, there's no planning to be done right now. There's just a lot of keep moving like that. But what do you think would be, or what are some places where you might want to play and explore for people to have that experience of knowing that they can come with whatever their identities are, and it can be it's always a choice, but not a forced choice to not express some aspect of oneself.
Yeah, we don't want to, because I think one of the things in one of the calls I was on last week, clearly not everybody feels comfortable self-IDing, but they were on the distribution for the vigil, and that's how we got the word out. So I won't use your information only unless you give me permission to use it. So you had to come back. There's got to be checks and balances where you come back and say, I want to participate in this. You may not want to participate in the network going forward, which is fine, but I have to give you that ability to opt in and out. So there's got to be an opt in out feature for people. And then when the conversation may go to something you may not be comfortable with, there's got to be a way for you to say, I want to be removed from the chat. And we have to trust that our colleagues can have different views or opinions, but will be guided by those behaviors that we all have to live by. And so listening more, also making sure we're giving ourselves the space and grace to make some mistakes, but to go slow. And that's the thing I think in this moment, people want you to react really fast. And I want us to all, if you're in this work, to really be comfortable moving, and don't let everything that's happening make you feel like you're forced to do something that you're not ready to. Do your work, do your homework, get your partners that you want to collaborate with, learn more from. Benchmark is so important. Hearing what others are doing. Will this work? And actually meeting your organization where they are. Because just where we are today may not be where your organization is. And so don't move quicker than what you have the support for to get done. Jane also talked about leaders up and down. You need top down, and then you also need bottom up. And then you need across, because managers of people is so important, and they set the tone for how the teams work and vibe, and you want everybody to feel safe. Ultimately feel safe in doing what they need to be successful. And these are all deeply personal ways that we intersect. And oftentimes it's like you have to know that in different communities, people feel that you're not doing certain things. So the hard part, right? You're not something enough. Whatever that is.
So we had a moment of
they all knew what I meant. The amen. They knew what I meant. You're not being vocal enough. You're not doing this enough. You're not standing up enough. Who is to tell us how either out or expressive or, at that event, your attendance, that doesn't mean you're any less supportive, because you have no idea why the person showed up, talked about, or did what they did. So you got to meet people where they are. And I think that's the central thing in this work that people have to appreciate as we work as colleagues, that not everybody's able to move at the pace that you are. And so ultimately that is what I feel is the platinum rule in everything that we're trying to do. Not do unto others as you would like done unto yourself, but really understand, listen, and appreciate how that other person wants it to be for them. And that's the platinum rule. And I think if we could help our organizations and our people understand that, we'll be all in a better place.
So that was good food. No, that was you really just messed me up.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just realized
I appreciate it.
There are emails in my box, and
this is a good place to be stuck, because I think one of the things that I definitely wanted to say, then we want to open it up for people just to share what you're doing and maybe what you might need, or what would you like information about, because the wisdom of the group may actually provide some of the things that you're looking for. But one of the things I've been very, very grateful for are just unsolicited emails and sometimes text messages and phone calls of people saying, one person just said, I just would not want to be you right now. Like this, I just don't want to be you managing what you have to manage, or anybody on your team. So I just want you all to know that it means so much that you appreciate what you do. And as the people who are usually fielding the front lines of the requests and the concerns and the anger and the feedback, that it's really, really important that you find ways to ground yourself, whatever that might be. You must do that work, because you all know you cannot give from an empty tank. You just cannot. You can try and fake it for a while, and you will go down. And the conversations that are happening, and I really kind of go back to the point, I think that, I forget who brought it up, the whole idea of the amount of non-disclosure that happens in the workplace, particularly around religious identity, the experience of discrimination or the experience of bias. We don't have facility with it. So by the time people are coming to us in moments like this, it is an emotional level that most people don't encounter on a daily basis. And as one of my best friends says, I don't look like what I've been through. You have no idea what I'm doing over here to not be over there in a very different way. Like, take this week off because we are holding, literally just kind of holding and almost trying to be porous to let it all come through so that it can come out of that person. And it is not easy. It wasn't. That's the other thing that I want to say.
It was never.
It was never. It wasn't when it's been around race. It's not been when it's been around issues for women. It has never been that when it was sexual orientation and gender identity, national ethnicity, national origin, immigration status. Like, none of that is easy when there is this huge emotional experience. So you really have to ground yourself in practices that remind you of not what you do, but who you are and why you do what you do. Because if you don't do that, then we just if you're no longer able to kind of bend with the flow, you just get snapped. So I wanted to say that. Thank you. So would love to hear from a few people with the time that we have left of things to do. And you do need to use the mic so that people can hear us on Zoom.
Thank you so much. This has been great. One question is a twofer question. One question I have is your point about really being balanced and thoughtful, taking action. How do you think about that now in a time where even inaction almost sends a message to people that you're not doing anything or you don't care? And within that, in my organization, we've encountered some people are understanding of, we're being thoughtful, but are like, okay, we're going to self-organize and do shadow activities, right? And of course, you want people to self-organize, but if they're using firm email and things like that, like, how do you balance, like, having a level of control, but then making sure you're not being reactive in terms of programming.
Yeah, and I think most organizations, if you think, have some sort of framework on when you respond or do certain things, and having that in place for things. There's no playbook to this, I'll tell you. And as it's evolving every day, you have to figure out what's the right answer. And so you're always going to have self-organizing, and I think you have to be okay with that too. What you want is to be able to create the space where they're going to come and involve you and see you as an advisor and someone that they will have counsel with, a safe pace to run ideas. I know that, some of these channels are going to happen. We want to be respectful of each other as colleagues. That's got to be a guiding principle in whatever forum you're trying to pull together. I think it's also has to remain open to all, because that's the way that you're going to have at least the ability to make sure that people are on their best behavior. I think it also keeps us balanced in that way. But also because people that genuinely want to understand more want to come to a place where they can learn. Because anyone, if you think about any of our BRGs or historical BRG communities, have been allies, supporters, or actual members of those underrepresented groups. And we have to create space, because I believe that these communities also provide the education that we need in the workplace that we have not gotten from our individual lived experiences. And so the ways that we learn are through that. And so these communities, whether they're grassroots or ones that you help form, I think are the way to go. And you just want to be able to help guide and figure out, okay, appreciate the timing. It may not always work out in the accelerated way that most want, but we want to do it, so that you don't have to pull something back or, make a mistake or offend any of our colleagues. That's most important. And so that's where the slow, but also, hey, we also need to know what you need. And that's where grassroots helps give us an ear to the ground and what's happening. So I think it's both.
I want to add one thing there. So one of the bits of work that we do in our education program primarily, but it's something that we started socializing in our workplace program a little bit more, is the work around understanding how conflict works. And really, and particularly, how does conflict work within a person, and how do they respond when in the face of conflict? And one of the things that is important to remember, people will often come to you and talk to you about their positions. They may not immediately surface the need behind the position. And one of the things that we want to be mindful of is that the attack in Israel basically has left the entire global Jewish population wondering, is this the beginning of the next Holocaust? That is something that maybe no one has said. They have taken positions, they've told you about their positions, they've told you about what they want. But if you can imagine the speaking of that, the horror of the acknowledgement is maybe something that's not been said. So one of the things that we want to purpose ourselves to do is to, when someone comes with the position, regardless of who it is, to be able to ask the question, tell me more about that. Tell me if you can, why that's important. And they may not be able to in that moment, and that's fine. But you want to have a practice of asking why. Not why to validate, why for your own understanding of the need behind the position. Anyone else or anyone online who either has a question or would like to share something? They won't be able to hear you online, though, so you have to come up here.
No such thing as subtlety. Thank you so much. This was wonderful and amazing. One of the things I was going to share that we've done was, in addition to mindfulness, trauma-informed meditation, but was also, we knew that there's members of the staff that wanted a action. what can I be doing, and sharing out like anti-harassment trainings that were being offered with other organizations to stand up against anti-Semitism, to stand up against Islamophobia and xenophobia. So it felt like staff were like, yes, care for me. Also, can you provide other resources? When you're operating, I think, with a staff that's like, I want to do something, we found that was helpful as well. Like, so kind of a holistic approach, right? An offering.
Yeah.
This just pointing out what was happening around the city, what's happening online, what are free, what are we doing, and also, of course, partnering with Tanenbaum. It was helpful that we had something on the calendar for December. It would have been more helpful if we had scheduled the programming with Tanenbaum earlier. That would have been much more helpful.
I was just going to add the thing that we didn't do. I'm sorry. We didn't talk about the actual session.
Yeah, we should talk about that. We should talk about that.
So it was, you want to
highlight? So the session was specifically, I thought, so there are a couple of different ways in which we've been called into action and then also called to advise. So some of the activities we've been engaged in have been asked to sit in on the listening sessions that companies are holding and really just be the outside moderator to hold the space for the conversation. In some instances, it's a listening session where we are just asked to be present, to be able to not like respond to a person, but to present models like managing behavior and not belief, etc. But this one called and said, so we're going to be doing a session on grief and mourning. And, do you have, could you come in? I do what she says. I'm humble and obedient. But what it allowed us to do, so one of the things that, you never know how things resonate. During the pandemic, in June of 2020, we actually held a webinar called Grief and Mourning in Times of Crisis. And I was able to interview the actually founder and spiritual director of the seminary that I attended, Reverend Diane Burke, and another gentleman who I apologize that I can't remember his name, who was on the board of the National Association of Mental Illness. And so we presented that session. If you remember, because it's very easy to forget, June of 2020, at least in New York, where we literally did not know how many people would survive. It was an apocalyptic event. And the one thing that I remember that I was able to share, a couple of things that I pulled from that webinar, it's on our YouTube page, it's free, you can access it. But my Reverend Burke talked about the idea of, one, that grief and mourning are not the same as much as we use them interchangeably. Mourning is the outer expression that happens more in the immediacy of a death or a loss. Grieving you can do for your entire life. And the example that I offered is that my sister, Kim, died when she was 24 from Hodgkin's disease. I was 28. The day after she died, I stopped being her brother in the way that I had before her death. That shifted. So there is a shift of identity. There is a shift of being with grief and loss. And that grief can sometimes trigger what you thought was done.
And then everybody else being triggered by certain things during these moments. And so it was a good way for us to put our arms around everyone. And so when you said, what can people do? It's how are we checking in on our colleagues? Just like we had the muscle during COVID, to do that on a more regular basis. Because I don't know how people are experiencing this right now. We have no idea. And so just regular check-ins is a great human way. Don't assume anything, but are we doing that with a level of intentionality? Because people are not okay today. And how this is now living out, it's not going away anytime soon. And so wanting to make sure that we are caring for our colleagues. We did a meditation. We gave, obviously, the updates.
Powerful meditation.
Surely was.
In a minute, for those of you who practice meditation or any kind of meditation practice, what's her name?
Oh gosh.
Laura.
Laura.
Yeah.
From Purpose Flow.
Purpose Flow.
Purpose Flow.
She didn't have more than 90 seconds.
Right.
And
to get
we were
in.
And so much so that I was kind of like, I don't know if I can actually come back and do my part. I need to go sit down a little bit.
Right.
But it was very impactful. And here's the thing. We have to be listening deeply. That is actually the practice of empathy. People think of empathy as feeling. It's actually listening deeply. Listening deeply is what gives you access to the experience of someone else. And creative. We are all innovative. You're all innovative. There is no playbook. There is no one way. But I think one of the things that we'll leave you with, because we've got the 0 minute card, I would just think it's important to leave you with the idea that people may not have the language to actually share what they need. They may not really have the language. And we can't assume that because people are not saying something that there's not a need. So to a certain degree, we want to be always inquiring, checking in, and and then just listening for what people say, because what they say on Monday may be very different than what they say on Tuesday. And Tuesday may provide information about something you can take action on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.